So I followed the historical performers era candidates. You can get 7. Um, and so here are the nominees: Ole Anderson, Afa and Sika, Bullet Bob, Tully and Arn, the British Bulldogs, June Byers, Wild Bull Curry, JYD, Cowboy Bob Ellis, Pampero Firpo, Black Gordman and Goliath, Archie Goldie, the Mongolian Stomper, Heart Foundation, Sputnik Monroe, the Texas Outlaws, Dusty Rhodes and Dick Murdoch, Johnny Rougeau, Iron Sheik, Steamboat and Youngblood, Mad Dog and Butcher Vachon, and then, of course, the Von Erichs. So, JD, out of those people, you get 7 maximum. Who so far do you have?
I have 3. I
Okay.
have 3 chosen for this. I have the Von Erichs, I have Wild Bull Curry, and I have Sputnik Monroe. Those are my 3 choices. I left myself open to 4 more because I want conversation. I'll be honest with you, I think there's a lot of people on this list who aren't Hall of Fame caliber. I truly believe that.
Yeah. I felt that with a lot of the categories. So the first name I'm going to tell you that I voted for, I think is going to cause a rift. not really, but it'll cause some conversation. I voted for Ole.
Really?
I did.
Okay.
Because I think when it comes to Hall of Fame and when it comes to guys like Ole, because not only was he like a singles wrestler, he was a tag wrestler. There was, a big time tag team, the Andersons, for a long time. But he was also a booker for a long time. And everybody only wants to highlight his failures as a booker, but I'm like, he had so many years of success. And just the way that my brain operates and the way that I know this Hall of Fame, the way that it was set up is based off of baseball. And if you take a look at baseball, there's a lot of people in the Baseball Hall of Fame that maybe they were around for 20 years, but they had like 12 good ones. You know what I mean? And 8 of them were just like mediocre. Maybe like 2 or 3 were bad. And you don't really judge them off of their worst moments. You judge them off of their successes. And I'm like, you take a look at it, the guy was a big star in a lot of territories. And then he was the head booker in a lot of territories. And he had a lot of success for a long time. He did have some pretty spectacular failures. I agree with that. And I totally understand that. But I think the successes outweigh the failures to me. He's one of those guys that he just held on to the book too long in too many places.
How long did he book Georgia?
I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but I know that it was, oh man. I mean, it had to have been like late 70s up to like whenever it died out in like 84, 85, right?
Yeah, late 70s. I want to say 79 to 84. Yeah, 84. And then, he had some good years with TBS. Like, they drew, right? He was one of the first guys to expand nationally.
Yeah.
Right. They marched into Ohio, Southern Ohio, and really started getting that based on the TBS, the reach of TBS. So Ole likes to blame Vince for a lot of stuff, but he was doing it too. He just got beat.
Vince was just slicker at it and had the allure of New York behind him whenever he did.
Geography plays a big factor in Vince McMahon's success. It really does. When Ole gets bought out of Georgia Championship Wrestling, he creates Championship Wrestling from Georgia, has a show on TBS Saturday mornings. It doesn't draw.
No.
And then when he comes back to book in 90, you and I have gone toe to toe with this one, the Black Scorpion, stuff like that, didn't draw. He comes back in 93 when Bischoff gets hired, right? Ole is the booker again. Doesn't draw.
No.
Right.
And it's like, he should have not taken those jobs, but he's a wrestler. I mean, he was way too old. He was way too out of touch in that time. And look, when he come back with Championship Wrestling from Georgia, he didn't really draw. I know that he did lose a lot of his talent. And I know that, they did try like him and Ann Gunkel try to put a promotion together. Isn't that what happened? The Championship Wrestling from Georgia.
The Ann Gunkel stuff was earlier. That was Ann Gunkel was a decade before. That was the war in the 70s with
I just recently read in The Death of the Territories that they had come together at some point in the 80s, Ole and Ann, to fend off Vince McMahon going into the territory.
I gotta reread that.
I believe they did team up.
She might have been. She may have been working with him at the time there, but I mean, the famous Ann Gunkel stuff was after Ray Gunkel had passed away in the 70s. That was the big Atlanta War in 74, I believe. Like, so that was, and Ole was a talent on that. I don't think he was booking at the time. Watts was actually a big booker there for Georgia at the time. That's where Watts cut his teeth. Booking was in Georgia. So I mean, like, I don't know, it's a successful territory. By the way, Ann Gunkel, quite the fastball back in the day.
Yeah.
Very, very talented. So I don't know, man. I mean, that is a controversial one. I can't hate you for it, but I also cannot condone it, sir.
Yeah, I know. I read after reading Dave's obituary, and I kind of took a look at it again, and just after hearing Jim Cornette talk about him on his podcast, I'm like, man, the guy. I think the guy has got a great case. He's been on the ballot a long time.
Yes.
I think now is the time to go in. Maybe last year was probably the year that he was going to make it, because he had just, I can't remember if he had just died. Yeah, he had just died.
He just passed, yeah.
Yeah, because we actually did like an obit to him, and that was a lot of fun. Even though like obits are really sad, we actually had a lot of fun just kind of looking into Ole and talking about Ole. But and plus, I think he just deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, because after Vince had fucked him over, they actually were in the same place at the same time a couple years after that. And Vince tried to make amends with Ole and bring him into the WWF. And he said, fuck you and fuck your wife too. And I think, honestly, he deserves to be Hall of Fame just for that.
That's your best argument you made so far. Anyone that tells Vince McMahon to go fuck himself and tells his wife to go fuck herself, I can't hate that, to be quite honest with you. That's like all-time top 5 interactions right there.
Yeah. So the rest of my ballot, June Byers, shout out to Jonathan Snowden, who actually wrote a really good article on his Substack. It's free. About June Byers. I didn't know until I read that just how big of a star that she was. She was, in the same era as Mildred Burke. Now the women, were never really like put in a position to be able to draw, but she actually, at times did draw. So did Mildred Burke. And so Mildred Burke is one, and June Byers is like right behind her as far as like, one of the more important women in the history of pro wrestling. And of course, I know Moolah too, of course, but I did give some consideration to June Byers. I hope she gets in. I think Jonathan did a lot of good work on that. JD, I recommend you checking that out before you finalize your ballot. I think that he might sway you. That's the only reason I put her on there, is because I was swayed by Snowden. So, and he's a very talented writer.
He is a very talented writer.
Yeah. Oh, clicked the wrong thing. And then I too voted for Wild Bull Curry.
The father of hardcore wrestling.
I also voted for JYD, the Junkyard Dog.
Really? You thought? I thought about the dog because he had just such an amazing run in Louisiana, Louisiana specifically. Great book called The King of New Orleans about the JYD. Highly recommend it. Like, the man was one of the biggest stars of the early 1980s. Like, when he's like, I talked about that was rich with the Orndorff being a first round draft pick. Like, JYD is also like a first round draft pick in the WWE, like in the WWE expansion here, because that's how big a star he was. I don't know. I struggle with his WWE run though. WWF run, I should say.
He came into the WWF run, and he was positioned to be the number 2 babyface. There, he ultimately ends up flaming out, and then he just has another horrible WCW run for. I think he went back to WCW in like 1988, and then maybe 89, something like that.
89.
And then Bill Watts brought him back in 92, and it was just horrible. But it's one of those things where can you judge the guy based on when he was completely done, right? And just kind of hanging on, needing money. Or do you really judge him based off of his greatest successes? And man, was he a draw. I mean, he was a legit, like very few people have, and I know it was only, some people want to say like, it was like 1 to 2 years. It was like 4 years.
4.
It was 4
years.
It's
84.
Yeah, and then when he was the number 2 babyface in the WWF, like he actually was a big part of their popularity. Like he was on there, he was on the cartoon. Now he just couldn't keep his shit together, and Vince couldn't trust him, and so they got rid of him. But he did have, like, I would say that first year in WWF, he did really well.
We'll put it this way: when the dog shows up in WWF, and like it's debuts were just different back then. Like the crowd's there and they hear bump, 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 ba bump, 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 ba bump. You know, another one bites the dust, and they freaking go crazy because they know it's the Junkyard Dog, right? That's how big a star JYD was, especially in the early '80s. That Northeast crowd, because of cable TV, knew who was coming just based on his music. Right, that's like it reminds me a little bit of when Copeland debuted in AEW just about a year ago. Right, when you heard Alter Bridge, you just knew it was him. So I mean, it says a lot to the dog's star power. It really does. Like that early '80s run in Mid South it's epic. 4 years is not a long time though.
Yeah, but it was longer than the Von Erichs. so it was. Von Erichs were like what? Like they really the Freebird Von Erichs thing was Christmas night 1982, and then they had all of 1983.
But they were drawing.
Guys,
they drew before.
They're still good, but I mean, come on.
They drew before. They were drawing before the Von Erichs. They were drawing in Texas with. I mean, they were drawing before the Freebirds. Excuse me. Like it wasn't like the territory was dead on its ass. Like they started drawing in the late '70s with Kevin. Right, like that was like the Von. Okay, let's just transition to the Von Erichs. We're talking about them. The Von Erichs start drawing in the late '70s, right? And they did draw across the country. They did draw like when they were scattered on different places. They drew up through '86. They were drawn
right, but the act is the three people together. That's the way I took it. Now, if you're going to grade them all separately and then put all of their singular contributions together, then we have a little bit of a different story. But I'm looking at it as the act of those three guys as a trio. And when I'm looking at them as a trio, yes, they did wrestle other people other than the Fabulous Freebirds, but that was really what was the draw there, and that didn't last that long.
I think that's unfair because David dies, right?
Yes, but I mean that's what it is. Now I'm not saying they don't deserve to be in the Hall of Fame ever, but I'm like when you take a look at them compared to the Junkyard Dog had a 4-year run, and those guys had like 1.5.
Yeah. But the Junkyard Dog drew in where he drew. Like he drew in the Mid-South. The Von Erichs did draw in other places. The Von Erichs were huge draws in freaking Tel Aviv.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, they had TV in Israel.
That's what I'm saying. Like the Von Erichs were important. The Von Erichs started really getting wrestling over in Texas. And I'm not, I don't, maybe I just did the spirit of this wrong. I didn't look at it as the three. I voted for the Von Erichs based on the name, the Von Erichs.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm looking at it I'm voting in the totality of the Von Erich name is what I think where my vote goes. And the dog's great, but the dog didn't have a movie.
I mean, he could have a movie.
Could have a movie yet. Doesn't have a movie yet.
I mean, he was in the Hulk Hogan cartoon. It wasn't his voice though. It was the voice. Uncle Phil did the voice of the Junkyard
Did
Dog.
he really?
James Avery. Yeah.
James Avery had quite a good cartoon voiceover career. He's also Shredder.
Yes. In the original Ninja Turtles, like from the 80s, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The 87 and 84 Turtles. Yes. I mean, like I just think the Von Erichs had crossover appeal.
They did.
Like they sold merchandise. Like they were in TV commercials. Like the Von Erich name still means something in Texas, and despite everything, right? I mean, like they sold. And yeah, I get where you're coming from with the dog. I just think like when I think of the Von Erichs, I think of like where Kevin starts in the late 70s up through 86 is where the wheels really fall off the bus. I do think. Again, my vote is for the Von Erichs in totality. It's the trio run.
Well, if that, I mean, I already submitted my ballot, but but maybe I should have waited until we had this talk because I'm
surprised you didn't. I thought that's what we were going to do is sell each other on our votes.
Yeah. Well, no, the way I looked at it and the way that I read it, it was those three guys because it was a tag team vote. Those three guys as a tag team, because you like with the British Bulldogs. I didn't vote for the British Bulldogs either.
Nor did I.
Dynamite Kids the British Bulldogs had a very short run. They were influential. I don't think that they're more influential than a lot of the teams that I did vote for in the modern category.
Agreed.
But the run was real short. And Dynamite's already in. And I'm like, and then if you were to tell me, it's like, oh yeah, but Davey Boy went on to, headline Wembley Stadium and went on to do all this other stuff. And I'm just like, no, I'm only talking about the tag team, the British Bulldogs. So that was my thought process. So when I'm looking at these guys, it's a trio, a 6-man tag team champion, Kevin, David, and Kerry Von Erich. That's the way that I looked at it, and that's why I didn't vote for them, because that run with those 3 guys specifically together as a team was so short.
Yeah, I mean, I hear where you're coming from, but I just think that when you can't just look at. I don't think you can look at the Von Erichs the way you look at the British Bulldogs.
Yeah.
Like there's just too much there. Like there's just too much. Like this is a family that was intrinsically linked with the territory.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
That did still to this day. Like, and they drew. Like the whole family drew until it did.
I mean, Ross and Marshall are still like big in Dallas.
This is what I'm saying.
And they're like, like halfway, like, okay wrestlers.
Yeah, they're
right.
They're okay. They're fine. They've disappeared since AEW stopped running Texas. You've noticed
Marshall got hurt.
Oh, I didn't know that. Marshall got hurt.
He did. Yeah. I think he tore his pec or something like that. I read that. Yeah, I
didn't realize that. Yeah, I mean, like I'm a yay on the Von Erichs and an A on the dog.
I don't hate your vote on them.
Me
but I feel like if you voted for them and you're like, but the Junkyard Dogs run was too short, I'm like, well, it was actually, if you want to go like technically based off of who we're actually voting for, I would say that his run was longer.
Yeah, like I said, I'm counting the entirety of what the Von Erich meant, the Von Erich name meant to Texas. And based on that alone deserves Hall of Fame recognition.
Yes. Is Fritz in?
I don't know.
We should probably look into that. I don't know. That's a good question. I went Cowboy Bob Ellis.
Muse. John Muse is Fritz in the Hall of Fame.
We should text him really quick. Oh, no, you can't.
My phone is my camera. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll text him. But I also went to Cowboy Bob Ellis. What are your thoughts on Bob Ellis?
I don't know enough about Bob Ellis, quite frankly. So educate me.
He was just a guy that was just a big draw everywhere for a long time. But he wasn't very good in the ring. I believe that's the knock on him. And so he's been on the ballot for a long time. He never gets in. So I think that's really why. But if you take a look at his credentials, as far as like longevity, as far as being able to draw, like the guy was a big star everywhere. And he WWA World Heavyweight Champion, IWA World Heavyweight Champion in Australia. He headlined. I think he headlined with Bruno at a certain point, and he did stuff in Japan. Like the guy was just everywhere. Detroit, Florida, Central States, like Mid-Atlantic, and he was kind of a top guy everywhere. And so he just never really got the recognition because I think he was just not like that good in the ring. But I'm like, man, if you're around for that, I think people overrate match quality when it comes to this stuff.
Agreed.
Versus, I think the most important thing is, were you a draw? Ultimately, and like, were you good? Now
I don't know.
But having good matches is also important. I'm not saying that's not important. But there were some people in the modern that I didn't vote for, even though like I really like their matches. But they never really pushed through and were on top for very long, or if they were, I mean, they didn't draw. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, it's like, I mean, that's what pro wrestling is about. So, but Cowboy Bob Ellis was around everywhere, and he did a lot of business for a long time. And I think he was born in 1929. He's still alive. So he's out there. He's still kicking. So maybe he can actually enjoy this. I think he's probably, I don't know. He's pretty freaking old. He's like almost 100 years old, but
I don't think he'd care if he's in the Observer Hall of Fame, but that's pretty cool nonetheless.
Yeah. But I mean, that was kind of like my uneducated version, but I did get a chance to do some reading on him, and I had heard some people do some podcasts about him, and I was just like, every time I hear people talk about him, I'm just surprised that the guy's just not in, and just it didn't make any sense to me that he's not in.
Mm-hmm.
Also went Sputnik Monroe like you, so we have that in common. We talked about Sputnik a lot, but he was the reason why Memphis specifically they desegregated pro wrestling shows because he advocated to have black people at the shows and kind of sitting with the white people and things like that. So it was like desegregated. It was a huge deal. It was the first time that had happened in Memphis.
I think it's super. I think some things, like you talked about drawing being super important. I think that some things are more important than drawing. I think some things are more important than work rate. Sometimes I think so. What happens in the world socially matters more, and what kind of an impact an individual has upon the sport. Sputnik Monroe, his presence helped change pro wrestling in Memphis. Like if if we have to be such nerds and into stats and stuff like that that we can't acknowledge when an individual actually has an impact on the fabric of society, or at least a small sliver of society, I think we've lost the plot on what's truly important. And Sputnik Monroe's efforts helped change and desegregate and make the world a little bit better place in, quite frankly, a racist southern town in the 1950s.
Yeah.
Right? Like I think that what Sputnik Monroe brought as a person far outshines what he, and his band did draw, like band did draw all that other stuff. I think that I think a presence like Sputnik Monroe belongs in the Hall of Fame specifically on that alone.
Yeah, I obviously agree. He's gonna. I hope he gets in this year.
Me too.
And HBO at one point was actually gonna make a movie about his life, and I don't think they ever did it, but it was like on the table at one point. I wonder why they never went through. I mean, ideas pop up all the time, and sometimes the movies don't get finished, and that's probably what happened.
Movies get greenlit all the time, right? Like the process of making a movie is very difficult. Like millions of scripts are written, hundreds of thousands of things get greenlit, tens of thousands of things get shot, hundreds of things get screened. You know, the process of filmmaking from beginning to end is very, very difficult. The odds are constantly against something getting finished. Like just finishing a movie, even a shitty movie, is difficult, let alone a good one.
And then lastly, Johnny Rougeau, just his drawing ability and booking ability in Montreal specifically over a long period of time, I just felt like warranted. I've read a lot about him, heard a lot about him, and I think that he should absolutely be in.
I heard a lot of what Pat LaPrade said about him last year, and I don't disagree that he should be in based on that. I just don't know enough personally, right? I feel like I would be. I have issue with like putting my vote towards something that I don't know myself, and I feel like I'm kind of like parroting on somebody else's credibility when I do stuff like that, and I don't feel comfortable.
Well, I think if somebody does write something and publish something, you know what I mean, and you read it, then now you know. And so that's
I agree with that.
That's what I did. I didn't do a ton of research outside of what Pat LaPrade said, and plus I read the Andre book, and he talks about Johnny Rougeau in there. But I respect Pat, so
I do too. But I just don't know if I don't know how comfortable I feel about that. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong one way or the other, but it's something that's maybe up mine a little bit, where I feel like, well, this person says I should vote for this person, so I should vote for this person. Like I don't feel comfortable voting in local elections if I don't really know who the people are, what they stand for. You know what I'm saying? Well, like I hate second boxes.
You got to do some research because we couldn't live through any of this stuff, right? That's the historical one. So that's why you got to at least read what has been written about them.
But that's the hard thing about research, is like the people who take the time to put stuff out there are, you know, presenting a side of the story, and like you have to just accept their research as fact. And like, I don't know, like it's hard for me, having not been through Montreal, to sit there and say, yes, this has to be it because I trust this person. I don't know, man. I don't know how I feel about that.
I gotcha.